We are turning our attention now to the detailed source material surrounding the 2012 murder of Jordan Davis.
Mhm.
This is an incident that, it stands as one of the most tragic and legally complex flashpoints in the national conversation.
It really does. It touches on race, gun laws, self-defense, so many things.
It is a profound and difficult topic, and we want to approach this exploration with the seriousness and respect that it's due. A young life was lost, and the impact, it was just indelible.
Right. And the documents we have, they really detail the story of a confrontation over something as ordinary as loud music.
Yeah.
And it escalated with just shocking speed into fatal violence.
Yeah.
So our objective is to really examine the sources to understand the anatomy of that escalation.
And the legal battle that came after.
Exactly. The legal battle, which was so contested, it involved Florida's stand your ground law, and then, of course, the huge social and political ripple effects.
So let's start with the core facts of this tragedy. It happened on the evening of November 23rd, 2012. Jordan Davis, a 17-year-old African-American high school student, was fatally shot by Michael David Dunn, a 45-year-old white software developer.
And this all took place at a Gate Petroleum gas station in Jacksonville, Florida.
The entire horrific sequence began with an argument over the volume of music, the music that Jordan and his friends were listening to.
It's the sheer, the triviality of the starting point that leads to such an irreversible end. That's what makes this material so compelling and, frankly, heartbreaking.
Let's zoom in on those few hours leading up to the confrontation, because the sources show both parties were engaged in entirely ordinary activities.
Completely ordinary,
Yeah.
which makes the violence all the more unsettling, right?
Exactly. So on one side, you have Michael Dunn and his fiancée, Rhonda Ruger. They were coming from Brevard County up to Jacksonville.
Right. They were there for Dunn's son's wedding ceremony in Orange Park.
So they were just passing through.
Yes. And that detail of them being travelers, maybe a bit stressed, it adds some context. The sources say they actually left the wedding reception early.
Why was that?
They needed to get back to their hotel to care for their 6-month-old puppy. So this stop at the Gate Petroleum gas station, it wasn't pre-planned for trouble. They just stopped to pick up a bottle of wine.
A completely routine, everyday errand around 7:30 in the evening.
Mm-hmm.
And at the very same time, Jordan Davis and his three friends, Tommy Storns, Leland Brunson, and Tevin Thompson, they were also doing something completely typical.
Just being teenagers. The sources say they'd spent the day traveling around to different malls.
And they stopped at the exact same gas station.
It's the exact same one. And their reason was even more routine: gum and cigarettes.
Okay, so the physical setup here is critical to understanding what happens next.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The 4 teenagers, they're in a red Dodge Durango SUV. The driver, Tommy Storns, he leaves the SUV running while he goes inside the store. So Brunson, Davis, and Thompson are still inside, and the music is playing. Dunn described it as very loud.
And Dunn, driving his black Volkswagen Jetta, pulls into the spot right next to them.
Right next to them. That close proximity, that's the immediate point of friction.
So with the cars side by side, Dunn and Ruer are immediately sort of immersed in the teenagers' music.
Right. And Ruier leaves their car to go buy white wine and chips. And it's in that brief moment that Dunn's annoyance becomes the spark.
The sources are very specific about the music, aren't they?
They are. The song was Beef by Lil Reese, featuring Lil Durk and Fredo Santana. A rap song with a very heavy bass line.
And Dunn was immediately annoyed by it.
Instantly. And the most damaging piece of testimony about his motive came from Ruer herself. Before she even went into the store, she testified that Dunn said to her, and I'm quoting, "I hate that thug music."
Thug music. That single phrase, it just frames everything that follows, doesn't it?
It establishes this immediate racialized bias underlying his annoyance.
And that statement became a huge point of contention later on.
Oh, absolutely. Because Dunn knew how damaging that phrasing was.
So he tried to walk it back.
He did. During the legal proceedings, he claimed he used a different phrase, rap crap. Something much less racially charged.
But Rower's testimony as an adversarial witness confirmed he said thug music.
Yes, and that stuck. It ensured the whole dispute was framed not just as a noise complaint, but as a confrontation that was layered with this immediate, visceral, racialized judgment.
So it wasn't just about the noise, it was about who was making the noise.
It seems so. It set the stage for a dispute fueled by prejudice, not just a simple request for quiet.
And the transition from that verbal dispute to lethal violence was frighteningly quick.
Incredibly fast. So Ruhr's inside the store, and Dunn, annoyed by the bass, asks for the music to be turned down.
And the sources say that Tevin Thompson, who was in the front passenger seat, he actually did it.
He did. He initially complied and lowered the volume. So for a moment there, the conflict was diffused.
But that's the crucial turning point, right?
This is it. This is where the teenagers' assertion of their own space clashed with Dunn's expectation of compliance. Jordan Davis asked for the volume to be turned back up. And his protests, his verbal resistance, it continued right as the driver, Tommy Storns, gets back into the SUV. So the argument shifts. It's no longer about volume. It's about a perceived threat to Dunn's authority.
And that's the trigger. An independent witness, someone not with either group, later testified to hearing Dunn say something very specific.
Yeah, they overheard Dunn say, "No, you're not going to talk to me that way."
Which suggests he wasn't reacting to a physical threat at that moment. He was reacting to disrespect.
That's exactly the analysis that unfolded in court. And the sources confirmed Dunn had a concealed weapons permit. He immediately pulled a Taurus PT-99 handgun from his glove compartment.
So there was no attempt to drive away, no waiting, just the firearm.
The transition to violence was instantaneous. He simply introduced a gun into a verbal disagreement.
And he didn't fire a warning shot or anything like that. He began firing directly at the SUV.
Directly at the passenger side door where Jordan Davis was sitting.
The initial attack, it was immediately fatal.
Tragically, yes.
Yeah.
The medical reports cited in the sources confirm he was hit by multiple bullets, shots to his legs, his lungs, his aorta. It would have been a rapid and massive loss of life.
And as the gunfire starts, the red Durango, it backs up. It tries to get away. The teenagers are trying to flee.
Right. But Dunn wasn't done.
No. The source material describes this really unnerving behavior where he keeps firing as they retreat.
He opened his car door, adopted what the sources call a tactical stance, and just continued shooting at the fleeing car.
A tactical stance.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like a panic reaction. It sounds like a trained posture.
It does. It suggests he wasn't just defending himself. He was actively engaging, projecting force.
And how many shots did he fire in total?
10 shots. And this is an important detail for the court. 4 of those shots hit the vehicle after it had already started retreating.
So it was already moving away from him.
Several yards away, yes. Now, Dunn later testified he kept firing because he feared for his safety and for Ruhr's safety.
But the sequence of events, the victims fleeing and him still shooting, it makes that justification seem very questionable.
Deeply questionable. It suggests a desire to punish or injure, rather than strictly defend against an immediate threat.
And after the shooting finally stops, Storns drives the SUV to a nearby parking lot.
Just down the road. And that's where the sheer horror of it all is realized. The description in the sources is brief, but it's just devastating.
What does it say?
It says they found Jordan Davis gasping for air.
An image that captures the reality of it all. A disagreement over sound resulted in a violent death in minutes.
Following the shooting, Dunn's actions. They were methodical, but they fundamentally undercut his whole claim of self-defense.
Right. Because he and Ruhr, they go straight back to their hotel.
They don't call 911. They don't wait for police. They just drive away, park, and then they order pizza.
Ordering pizza. That detail is it's so jarring. Waiting for police, reporting the incident. Those are key parts of a self-defense claim, aren't they?
They're core requirements. The fact that he ordered dinner and just carried on with a normal night, it speaks volumes.
What does it suggest to you, based on the sources?
It suggests the reaction of someone trying to cover up a crime, not someone who just survived a deadly encounter. If you truly believe you acted lawfully, especially under stand your ground, you call the police immediately.
Because by fleeing, he created a narrative of guilt.
Exactly. His defense team later had to argue he was justified in fleeing. And that's a nearly impossible position to argue from.
The next morning, though, the situation becomes unavoidable.
Right. Roser testified that she saw a local TV news report. It confirmed that Jordan Davis had died from the shooting.
And only then, the following day, does Dunn drive back to his home in Satellite Beach.
Yes, arriving around 10:30 a.m., his arrest was entirely dependent on an eyewitness at the gas station who had the presence of mind to report his license plate number.
So he didn't turn himself in?
No, not at all. And when he was finally arrested, that's when he presented his justification. He claimed that Jordan Davis had threatened him with a gun or a stick.
And this was the central pillar of his entire defense.
The absolute core of it. It was formulated to fit the precise legal language of stand your ground, that he reasonably believed he was in fear of death or great bodily harm.
But the source material documents 3 critical pieces of evidence that just systematically dismantled this claim.
Starting with the person who was with him the entire time, Rhonda Rohrer,
His fiancée.
his fiancée, who became a devastatingly adversarial witness for the prosecution. She testified that Dunn never mentioned a gun or a stick.
Not that night. Not the next morning.
Never. Not when they were driving away, not when they saw the news reports. I mean, if you genuinely believe your life was just threatened by a visible weapon, that's the first thing you talk about, right?
Of course. Her silence on that point was just lethal to his credibility.
And then you have the physical evidence, or rather the lack of it. Investigators searched the teenager's SUV completely.
And found no weapons.
No weapons whatsoever.
And the forensic testimony was crucial there, too, wasn't it?
It was. Forensic scientists determined that given the incredibly short distance the SUV traveled, a weapon couldn't have been stashed or thrown out without being immediately visible to investigators.
So the defense had to argue that these teens, while being shot at, flawlessly hid a weapon that didn't exist.
Which the scientific evidence deemed highly improbable, if not impossible. The absence of evidence strongly suggested the absence of a weapon.
And there was one final contradiction about him trying to contact the police.
Yes, he tried to build this narrative that he wasn't fleeing, just delaying his interaction with police.
Right.
He testified that he called a neighbor who worked in law enforcement to arrange a discussion. But the phone records showed the exact opposite.
The neighbor called him.
The neighbor called him. And Rohrer further testified that the shooting was never even discussed during that call.
So piece by piece, the investigation just stalled. It characterized his behavior as evasion and dishonesty. It completely undermined his claim of justified fear.
Now, before we get into the 2 criminal trials which got so much attention, we should mention the civil litigation.
Right, from the Davis family. Jordan's parents, Ron Davis and Lucy McBath, along with some of the other passengers, they filed civil complaints.
For wrongful death and defamation, yes. Represented by attorney John Michael Phillips.
And those cases were settled.
They were. For an undisclosed amount in January 2014. And it's an interesting point because Dunn had been declared broke in his criminal trial, but his liability was covered by insurance.
So the settlement offered some measure of closure for the family on the civil side.
It did. But the real legal drama, the thing that captured the nation, was the criminal proceedings. And that was all because of Florida's Stand Your Ground law.
So for anyone listening, can you just break down what that law meant in Florida at that time? Why was it the pivot point for Dunn's defense?
That's a crucial question. Stand Your Ground, or SYG, it essentially eliminated the duty to retreat.
Okay.
Before SYG, if you were attacked, you had a legal duty to retreat if you could, before using deadly force. SYG removed that. It allowed a person to use deadly force without retreating if they reasonably believed it was necessary to prevent death or great bodily harm.
And that phrase, reasonably believed, is key.
It's everything. The defense didn't have to prove Dunn was threatened, only that his belief of a threat was reasonable.
So the whole defense, which they cited explicitly in their closing arguments, was based on this idea that Dunn perceived a threat, the gun or stick, and was justified in using lethal force immediately.
Precisely. That was their narrative. Loud music, disrespect, perceived weapon, justified response. The prosecution had to prove that his belief wasn't reasonable or that he acted out of malice.
And the jury deliberation in that first trial, it was intense, over 30 hours. The result was this really complex partial verdict, a win for the prosecution, but also confusing for the public. What did they agree on?
They found him guilty on 3 counts of attempted second-degree murder.
For firing at the 3 surviving teenagers.
Exactly. And 1 count of firing into an occupied vehicle. And this was a critical legal finding. By convicting him of attempted murder, the jury rejected the idea that he was acting in pure, lawful self-defense.
But they couldn't agree on the main charge, first-degree murder for the death of Jordan Davis.
They were deadlocked. They declared a mistrial on that specific count.
Why the deadlock there when they convicted him on the other charges?
It came down to premeditation. First-degree murder requires proof of a deliberate, preconceived intent to kill. The jury accepted that he acted with malice when shooting at the fleeing car, but they struggled to agree that he had planned to kill Jordy Davis in the seconds leading up to it.
But even with that mistrial, the sources emphasized that Dunn was already facing a massive sentence.
Oh, the consequences were huge. Because he used a firearm, Florida's 10-20 life gun law enhancements kicked in.
What did that mean for him?
It meant a mandatory minimum of 20 years for each attempted murder count. So that's 60 years right there. Plus, up to 15 for firing into the vehicle.
So a minimum of 75 years in prison.
A staggering mandatory sentence. The sources highlight that even if the murder charge was never retried, he was almost certainly going to die in prison.
But the prosecution immediately announced they would seek a retrial on the murder charge.
They did. The second trial began in September 2014, and this time the verdict was decisive.
What was different?
The prosecution likely focused even more intensely on the evidence of his flight and the contradictions in his story. And on October 1st, 2014, the jury returned a verdict.
Guilty of first-degree murder.
Guilty.
The sentencing then sealed his fate. Life in prison without parole, plus an additional 90 years.
That stacked sentence guaranteed he would never get out. Even if the murder conviction was somehow overturned on appeal, the 90 years from the attempted murders would still stand.
And he did continue to appeal, didn't he?
He did. His initial appeal was denied in 2016, and his final effort went all the way to the state's highest court in 2020.
On what grounds?
The Stand Your Ground law again, and also a claim of ineffective assistance of counsel, which is a common, though rarely successful, strategy.
And the Florida Supreme Court rejected it.
They refused to take the case, which finally concluded the decade-long legal process.
Moving beyond the legal framework, then, the source material offers some really, frankly, disturbing insight into Michael Dunn's character before the shooting.
Yes, context that the jury heard. His former neighbor, Charles Hendricks, described him as arrogant and controlling.
And Hendricks' testimony, it painted a picture of a man prone to aggression, right?
It did. He mentioned that Dunn's ex-wives had reported him as being violent and abusive. It helped the prosecution frame his response to the teenagers as consistent with a pattern, not an isolated moment of fear.
And there was that really chilling anecdote that Hendricks shared.
About an unrelated incident, yes, where Dunn was furious with someone and asked Hendricks if he knew anyone who could take care of this person.
Which Hendricks interpreted as Dunn wanting to arrange a hit.
Exactly. It's the kind of detail that underscores the temperament they were dealing with.
But despite all of this, Dunn's family defended him.
They did. His daughter, Rebecca Dunn, said publicly, "He's a good man, he's not a racist, he's very loving," and maintained he only acted to protect himself.
And it's here, in these social and moral dimensions, that this case just explodes beyond the local news.
It immediately became central to the national conversation about race, self-defense laws, and the dangers facing young black men in America.
The connection to other high-profile cases was immediate.
It was. Jordan Davis's father, Ron Davis, he spoke about his contact with Trayvon Martin's parents. He explicitly said that justice for Jordan was justice for Trayvon and for others.
The case was adopted by social justice activists as this profound reminder that unarmed black children who die, they matter as human beings.
And the sources strongly suggest that Jordan's murder was a critical catalyst for the Black Lives Matter movement. It just perfectly illustrated the systemic dangers of racial profiling and the subjective interpretation of threat.
But the most direct, personal, and political legacy of this, it lies with Jordan's mother, Lucy McBath.
She transformed her grief into just this incredible platform for advocacy. She became one of the most visible faces for gun safety.
I remember her speech at the 2016 Democratic National Convention.
So powerful, where she said, "His death doesn't overshadow his life."
And from that advocacy, she decided to enter politics.
Yes, running for Congress in Georgia in 2018. Her platform was laser-focused on common-sense gun law reform, driven by her experience and also motivated by the activism of the students from the Stoneman Douglas High School shooting.
So her personal tragedy became this catalyst for tangible legislative change.
And her success was groundbreaking. She defeated the incumbent Karen Handel in 2018. She won re-election in 2020. She solidified her place in Congress as this powerful symbol of a parent's refusal to let tragedy be the final word.
And beyond politics, the case also seeped into the culture.
It did. It was a primary inspiration for the young adult novel Dear Martin by Nick Stone. And even the rapper whose song started it all, Lil Reese, he tweeted his condolences and support for the family, emphasizing the human cost.
The profound legal and social significance of this case also led to several documentaries, didn't it?
Yes, a few prominent ones that tried to analyze the tragedy and the trials.
Two significant films in particular, each with a different angle. The first is 3.5 minutes, 10 bullets.
Right, from 2015. The title itself just distills that horrific timeline.
In that film, it focuses directly on the shooting, the trial, and the role of Stand Your Ground.
Very much so. Directed by Mark Silver, it used footage from the trial itself to great effect, allowing the audience to witness the arguments firsthand.
And it was recognized for its impact. It won a special jury award at Sundance for social impact.
Which highlights its goal,
Yeah.
not just to recount the story, but to influence public thought.
Yeah.
HBO distributed it, so it reached a wide audience.
And the second documentary, also from 2015, took a more ethical approach, The Armor of Light.
Yes, directed by Abigail Disney. This film used the tragedy to force a moral confrontation. It featured Lucy McBath, but also Rob Schenck, a pro-life evangelical minister.
And it posed this really challenging central question, didn't it?
It did. The film asked, is it possible to be both pro-gun and pro-life?
A deeply analytical framing.
It is. It used the case to highlight that ideological tension between the sanctity of life, a core pro-life tenet, and the embrace of broad gun ownership and aggressive self-defense laws. It forced a conversation.
So we have completed our analysis of the source material. We've traced this journey from a simple dispute over music volume all the way through a complex two-part trial to a first-degree murder conviction. And the ripple effects, they've extended directly into national activism, they've inspired cultural works, they've fueled a movement, and they launched the political career of Jordan Davis's mother.
This case really is a poignant illustration of the immense weight that these self-defense claims carry when they intersect with race, noise, and irreversible violence. What remains for you to consider, I think, is the profound challenge the legal system faces.
The challenge of differentiating between a perceived threat and objective fact.
Exactly. Between Michael Dunn's claim of a gun or a stick, which was motivated by prejudice and fear, and the verifiable facts, like the complete lack of a weapon. In those moments, the distinction between perception and proof, it determines not just an individual's fate, but the broader community's faith in justice itself.
Thank you for listening.